Everything rises and falls on leadership. The ability to lead well is fueled by living your cause and purpose. This podcast will equip you with the tools to do just that. Live and lead with cause and purpose. And now, author of the book, The Anatomy of Leadership, and our host, Chris Comeaux.
Hello and welcome. I'm excited today. I have a good friend with us on TCNtalks. Welcome, Ernesto Lopez, the founder and CEO of 1520 AI.
Hi, Chris. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you, man. You're a longtime friend, and I'm really excited what we're going to be talking about right now. Been wanting to do a show this year on AI, and it's interesting. You and I already had started corresponding. I had two people email me and said, you need to get with Ernesto and do a podcast on AI. Well, that's awesome because I'm already doing that. So let me introduce you to our audience, Ernesto. A lot of people in the hospice and palliative care space know you, but they may not know about your new role. So Ernesto Lopez is the founder and CEO of 1520 AI, where he leads the development of artificial intelligence solutions focused on hospice quality, compliance, and clinical operations. He's a registered nurse by training, makes him a bit of a unicorn. He has spent more than 2 decades leading healthcare organizations across hospice, home health, and even hospital settings. He combines deep operational experience with formal training in data analytics from Harvard Business School to build technology that supports caregivers, strengthens defensibility, and improves how serious illness is delivered. Ernesto, anything I left out that you might want to add to that?
No, that's quite a long list. Thank you. Humbled by the introduction.
You bet. Well, I always do ask our guests this question. What's your superpower? I know it's a tough question, but look forward to seeing how you answer.
That is a tough question, Chris. I would say, I'd start my disclaimers that my wife would probably think differently than what I'm about to answer. But I would say my superpower, and I'm thinking way back. I'm really good at connecting the dots when it comes to people and either talent or a specific things that they may be able to do, or if it's a product or a company. It's always been easy for me to see how several components and pieces work together. Kind of like putting together a puzzle. And so from early on, it was something I was really good at, and it's really helped me even today with what we're doing with 1520 AI. Putting together the pieces and components of folks that need to be able to come together with the right talent and the right commitment and focus to develop the things that we're doing.
I've had the privilege of knowing you, man, quite a while. I don't know if it's been quite 15 years, but it feels like quite a long time. But I can see what that's actually been really true to your journey. And I didn't tell you I was going to ask this, but 1520 AI, we're going to go a little bit more into the company in a little bit. I want to ask some AI questions in general first, but can you just connect the dots? Because I don't think I was going to ask that anywhere along the way, but it's a very unique name.
Sure. So it's sort of an insider, kind of name that was developed with my colleagues that are a few of them are partners of ours and are part of the company, and I got to know them over our journey at Harvard Business School. We spent 2 years working together, and the 1520 is basically it was a setting that we had an opportunity to take part of, and it was room number 1520, and so we kind of spent a lot of time talking about some of the things that we wanted to do and talking about the future and really looking to leverage this special knowledge and experience into a real business. And so we after going back and thinking about this, we felt like this was a special way to not only recognize that time period, but also be able to demonstrate how we as graduates of that program have come together and have been able to, launch forward what we've learned into a company that we believe will be very impactful to the hospice industry.
Well, very cool. Well, let's jump into some AI questions first. And what have you learned in the first year of running an AI company that maybe you didn't expect?
Boy, a lot. And I would say that, when you start this process, AI has been, as you know, around for some time, and in the world of business, many companies have over the last number of years have designed strategies to try to develop AI, and the last 18 months or so, we're seeing this really explode. And And when I was going through our journey at Harvard, we the one thing that really stood out for me was thinking about our industry, the hospice industry, and my own experiences as an executive, and looking at technology, and really experiencing when I started in hospice almost 15 years ago. How technology has evolved in our space. I spent most of my career on the acute care side of healthcare, and was kind of accustomed to how we utilize and leverage data. Obviously technology in healthcare. Whether it's equipment, or research, or simple things like how we document. I found that transition from acute care to post-acute care to be a significant drop in the way that technology was utilized. And so, thinking about that, and then experiencing and learning more about AI and seeing how it's evolved outside of healthcare and how it's starting to grow in healthcare, where hospice is just kind of just starting now. Where and so we asked me what's the things that were kind of different when we started. There was a bit of a conversation. Companies were talking about AI. I'm now starting to see quite a bit of a number of organizations that are actually coming in and reaching out to the hospices and promoting products that are AI, that have AI functionality, or are AI based, that potentially could fit within their needs. And so that number, or that sort of spike of not only interest internally in the industry, but also a spike of organizations and companies that are coming in to try to serve the hospice industry, that's increased exponentially in that very short period of time since we started.
Not to chase a rabbit too far, but again, I think it's so unique. I mean, a guy who's run hospice is, and now running an AI company. I mean, it gives you a unique position. And some of our peers who maybe are in CON states, you get that gut drop. Oh, I got a new competitor. You probably wake up every morning and read something like there's a new competitor kind of in this space. Does that feel accurate?
It does, and actually even deeper. Some of my closest colleagues, I'll get an email or a text message with a link to, "Have you heard of this company? Did you know that they were doing this?" And it's like, it does feel like it's every day. I'm certain that hospice leaders are feeling the same exact way when they have these kind of companies reaching out to them for the first time, and promoting products that don't exist or potentially could be of value to them. It's one of those challenges that it's a new service. We're used to dealing with PBMs and DME companies, and all the other types of support services that we're accustomed to seeing in the hospice industry. But this is a completely different category of service. And so people are asking a lot of questions. Leaders are wanting to make sure they're making the right decisions, and some leaders that I've spoken to, they want to really plan this out. They don't want to jump in head first. They want to really map out the next 2, 3, 5 years of where and how they think they're going to integrate and work with these new tools and this new technology in our space. And so it's really neat to see that full spectrum of where people are in their thinking and in their journey around embracing these types of tools in the hospice.
Well, let's back up a little bit more, because I really do want this show to be educational and helpful to our many hospice leaders that are navigating this. So when people hear AI, they often think magic. How do you explain simply what AI actually does and maybe what it does not do?
Yeah, absolutely. Magic is probably a tame word. I think a lot of people that I speak to, they are completely scared of AI. I think they read the headlines, they watch a lot of movies, you know, they, they think this is the first step of, of a transition of life for people. But ultimately, AI, really has been around since the 60s. I mean, the term artificial intelligence was first coined in the early 60s. And the journey of developing artificial intelligence over that period of time uh, has been steady but slow. And the last 3 years is when we really started seeing this explosion, when these large language models that were doing some really incredible things. And for folks that, for the first time, when you experience any interaction with a large language model such as ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude, it's fascinating because you see the ability to gather information and to answer questions that historically maybe we did a Google search and then we got a list of websites and then we start trying to dig in and find out what's really accurate, or is the information that I've searched, is it exactly what I need? And so, I mean, my own experience in the beginning was that, and so as you start learning, well, how does it actually do that, and how can it so quickly collect all this information, process it, and give it to you? And that's the beauty of these large language models, or LLMs. They're able to go out and gather information from all over the world and utilize your prompt or your question to provide you in its own way the best possible answer. And so, that's been probably the best use case for consumers, that are utilizing it day to day, or for whatever reason. And then I think the key here is the ability to really quickly organize and be able to analyze data at such a rapid pace is the what you would say the magic, right?
Hmm.
And so doing so, the LLMs have really, formed a foundation for some of the tools and some of the things that we're seeing today from software companies. That power of and the ability to process data. Now you create tools that you can customize to do very specific things. And so, for example, if you're wanting to utilize that kind of power to be able to go through, let's say, a list of hospice claims, and be able to organize them, and be able to look for specific patterns of specific inputs that you want to measure. It's pretty easy to be able to do that now with the power of these foundational LLMs. And so, um, everything that you see out there that's AI based, has a starting point with one of these big or maybe small LLMs that are out there that serve as sort of the batteries, or the engine that drives the actual AI model that's being designed by different companies. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm going to say something. You push back if you disagree, but someone recently explained it to me and said, picture the language model, the LLM, the abbreviation you keep using, these large language models, as the librarian. And then recently I've worked on a very sophisticated project, and I'd take it a step further. Yes, the LLM is like this amazing librarian, much better than Google, because as opposed to getting, 10,000 hits and trying to get the best hits, synthesize that information, analyze it, basically these AI models could do that for you. It could be the librarian. It could actually synthesize it, give you the book report and even their own analysis. But then you have to do something with it. But how quickly you could get from, if they can in college, which, feels like a lifetime ago and feels like a moment ago, you and I would go to the library, we would pull all the
Hmm.
articles, we'd have to read them and synthesize them in the book report. Now all of that's done literally within seconds. And then how you could apply that to whatever problem you're trying to solve, it's really amazing. It really is. So does that feel like an accurate description?
It does. I think that, to add on that, you have a librarian, right? But that librarian, if you use the same analogy, you have a library of books and references, and that information is pretty much static, right? It's not changing unless there's new books that are being brought into the library. But when you think about AI, it's like a librarian, yes, but it's collecting all these books, right? And those books are being published every day, every second. There's new information that's being put out there, and the source material could be absolutely, accurate, secure, and safe, or it may be, or it may not be. It might be, it may be satire. It might be something that, somebody is just, sharing their opinion about something, their views. And so you start thinking about the contributors to that library. And that's really the big challenge with AI, is that those contributions of data that people may be using in order to make, serious decisions or big decisions, may not be completely accurate. And I'll give the example. I mean, you may go to, let's say, ChatGPT, and you will put in a prompt and it'll ask a question about something, and you'll get, a like you said, a very organized, structured answer. And try going next week and asking the same prompt, and I guarantee you that the answer is going to be different.
Yeah.
It may not be dramatically different, but it absolutely will be different because it's constantly monitoring and bringing in new information, whether it doesn't know whether it's accurate or not.
Yeah.
And so that there isn't a filtration system in place to be able to, train, these LLMs to be able to differentiate between, this is true information, or this is something new that I've got to integrate into this answer that I'm providing the user. And so that's probably the biggest frustration. I've seen it around, if you're doing analysis specifically with numbers and mathematical formulas, coding. I mean, there's a number of different things where LLMs, can struggle. And so what I always tell people that utilize, AI every day for work, for personal life, is like, always double check. Like, it's not, you shouldn't always just take the response from the LLM or AI and say, okay, this is a fact. Make sure, especially if you're trying to make a decision based on the information that's being gathered, you have to be very very careful to verify. And I'll tell you that it's a lot of times you'll go back and the information isn't accurate, and then you go back and you prompt and say, and you tell the LLM, this is not accurate information. Oh, I'm so sorry. You're right. And then you get the right answer. And so I think that's the frustrating point. And I think that people are distrustful of AI because of it.
Yeah.
They love the magic. They love the way that it's gathering information, but the moment it starts giving them inaccuracies and what we call hallucinations, then that level of trust changes dramatically. And so my recommendation to people who are using it, obviously, check your math, check your work. But when it comes to healthcare tools and dealing with patient data, and you're dealing with um, elements that are really serious, that we can't afford to be inaccurate. We can't afford to be short or be off by a number. It has to be accurate, across the board. And so this is kind of the next step of how do we evolve, from where LLMs are today and create tools that, are able to provide accuracy and detail and be able to allow us as, healthcare leaders or operators to make those decisions accurately and not compromise patient care, not compromise privacy and security. And so that's the big climb that right now that companies that are coming into the hospice space are facing.
Well, maybe this is a segue question. What are one or two common myths that you would like to clear up?
I would say the first myth that's out there is that LLMs are constantly, if they're not fine tuned correctly, the word is that they're constantly learning and they're evolving and they're gathering information and becoming smarter. And partially, yes, I think that's true, because the more data you put into a system like this, it's seeing so many different variables and adapting to those variables. There's still a human in the loop. Like, there has to be a human involved in not only being able to measure and be able to verify and validate. And I at this point, that's still an important component and governance and ensuring that that these models are working the way they should be. And so people think, well, they're going to become autonomous and self-thinking, and they're going to take over things. And there's been a lot of stuff in the news. I mean, there was a really interesting article, not an article, but an interview with the CEO of Anthropic a few months ago, and there's this feedback commentary of, oh, this is things are going to evolve. It's going to be really dangerous, and these models are going to take over, and so I think that's that's definitely falsehood. I mean, I think that today there's so much control over what's happening that it would be very difficult for that to actually happen, unless we decided we're not going to have any boundaries or laws or controls over it. We'll just let these things run and do what they want to do. And I can't imagine that anyone wants that.
What are some of the biggest mistakes or maybe we're on the front edge of them, that you see leaders make when adopting AI in healthcare?
Biggest mistake is getting excited about the tech. You hear that someone is, built something, and immediately you get excited about, how you can integrate this into your workflow or to solve a specific problem, and not really doing the due diligence around how these tools are actually built. And there's been this, people say, oh, there's a gold rush to, for AI, that people are rushing out and building these tools. And even today, there are methodologies to be able to build AI that have become so simple that, I mean, just about anybody, can utilize some of these tools to build other AI and create an AI model that could actually do something for them. But the problem is that, if you don't have the proper structure and governance, especially in healthcare, where you're able to, ensure that you have guardrails around data and privacy protection, that, you're not bringing in a system into your, let's say, your database or into your network, where you have all your patient information, all your employee information, all these things that, if they get leaked out, could be extremely detrimental. I mean, obviously there's consequences and fines and reputation, and there's so many different things that can happen. And so what I have seen, some companies that are coming in aren't even thinking about that. They're kind of just trying to get a product out, sell it to whoever wants to buy it, and then walk away. And to me, you're going to see a lot of these small companies do that. They come in, they try to get someone to buy into their concept. They'll build a generic AI, and then they're gone. And so the hospice is left with maybe a product that is not safe, that's not accurate, and now they have no support for it because they simply came in, did what you asked, and they left. And so I would say, be very careful, do your research, ask a lot of questions around HIPAA and compliance. Make sure that these companies are there's a data safety certification. It's called SOC 2 Type 2, and all technology companies are familiar with it. You have to make sure that they're certified, or they're pending to be certified, because that means they're serious about protecting your data. And if they're not, they're not going to have any of those types of certifications, or take the time to engineer these kind of protections in order to either build a tool for you, or to be able to provide you these tools for your organization. So I would say, ask those two questions, and ask a lot of questions. Ask how, why, and ensure that they're accountable for what happens if something goes wrong, and that they're also accountable to how they're handling your data, that they're not reselling your data as well, because that's also a big issue. So as you're going through these data use agreements, ensure that that's a big part of it, that there's limited use in that data, and if they're not storing it themselves for use for other purposes, if that makes sense.
It feels almost the risk just went up by an order of magnitude, because the idea is that you wouldn't allow someone to come in your organization and suck specialized knowledge, then bring it out into the public domain. Certainly, especially now if you PHI, patient health information, etc. But generally, the way a large language model works, it could be like a Hoover, depending upon, you could have staff right now taking a great strategy or something in your organization and popping into a chat GPT, and then it is part of that language model, right, Ernesto? And so it feels like these risks have been there, but it feels like the risk is weightier now, just because the nature of how these LLMs work.
Absolutely. And I think that, taking a page from, Fortune 500 companies that are using AI, I mean, they have, serious levels of security and closed systems with these LLMs, where they have to protect their IP, their intellectual property. And so if an employee by mistake uploads a spreadsheet that that's confidential, or the specs on some product that's being built or designed, it's out there. I mean, it's out there, and if somebody else is using AI, they could actually prompt to get information about this product they're building, and there it is, because somebody put it out there. And so it's a serious concern. And I think that in healthcare, obviously it's a different type of security, but because we're talking about PHI and how important and how significant it's governed. we have to have those levels of control, and you don't want a hospice, inadvertently putting that information out, putting them at risk, and potentially, there are elements of IP competition as well. Strategies that hospices are doing in a market where there's competition. You don't want some of those details to get out where your competitors can get that information. But I mean, you'd be surprised. There's a lot of information out there
There
today.
is.
So there's been inadvertent leakage of data and details and even IP that maybe some people don't even know that it's happening or
Yep.
happened.
Well said. Well, let me set the table this way. I'm hoping later this year we're going to have Jim Collins on a podcast. I want to call this the lost chapter of Good to Great. If you remember, he had all these great principles in Good to Great. People remember the hedgehog concept, the flywheel, the doom loop, get the right people on the bus. The one everybody forgets is technology as an accelerator. And I don't know if you remember, Ernesto, it was all the rage. Even our National Hospice Organization meeting, Jim Collins came. And
Yeah.
so one of the premises when he wrote the book, and if you are listeners, Jim Collins, the great thing about him is he's data oriented. He has an army of MBAs. They crank data, and then the organizations that rise to the top based upon the data, they then go and do like basically a post-mortem, if you will, or like a dissection of what are the principles that made that organization rise to the top. Well, when they did Good to Great, this was in the dot-com bubble. And one of the things he said is, our hypothesis is we were going to find like whiz-bang technology is what made them go from good to great. So that's not what we found. And this to me is so profound in healthcare, Ernesto, because we don't do it this way. He said they understood what they did at such a great level, they only applied technology as an accelerator. We do the opposite in healthcare. We go purchase an EHR and we just purchased the panacea. It's going to fix all of our issues. And then 6 months later, we're like, we hate our EMR. Had no idea it was going to change my processes. And no, it's the exact opposite. And so I'd love for you to comment on it. And then where I want to go with my question is, how did people going forward balance speed, innovation with safety, trust, especially when patient care is involved, and really apply technology as an accelerator?
I think you've said it. I think it's taking those principles, those core principles that we hold very tightly, in the industry, and protect very fiercely. And so, I absolutely love and love the Collins, way of thinking of, hey, technology has its purpose, right, and its use, and at the end of the day, hospice is touch and feel. It's personal. It's sacred in many ways. And so, by integrating technology into what, hospices do, are we compromising that experience? Are we compromising, those core values that hospice was built around in order to get something done faster, and so it's an interesting perspective. And it's also, when I talk to other hospice leaders around the country, everybody has a different sort of need, and it's built around a couple of things. You mentioned EHR or ARMs, electronic medical records, and I want my staff to spend less time, documenting and more time taking care of patients. That's a beautiful concept, right? But then you have the counterbalance of like, we're measured by our number one payer and other payers by what we document in the medical record, and that documentation has got to be outstanding. It's got to flow. It's got to cross reference and connect, and so as much as we want to say we want to speed up this process so that we can have more time to do the things that we think are important, we have to be careful about what we give up by doing so. And so there's this balance of, focus on what the mission of your organization is and what's most important to you and your community and the people you serve. And then understand how you can accelerate certain pieces that add value to those those core principles. I think that's the approach that I would take versus, trying to get, try to solve a problem that potentially can become, have a different set of consequences because you've accelerated that process with technology. And now you've created another problem that you didn't want to have. And that problem could be, it could be patient family satisfaction. It could be, staff dissatisfier. It could be, a number of different things. And so being mindful of how technology impacts your operations based on those principles, I think it's something that it's a responsibility of every hospice leader to do before they jump into any type of tool that they're integrating into their organization.
That's well said. That's a great teach back of what really he meant by technology as an accelerator, not as a panacea, not as a silver bullet, as an accelerator.
Don't miss part 2 of this episode coming this Friday.